What's up, boys? Undead here, back with another video on the Shadowlands beta. They announced, was it 4, 8, 12, 14 new rogue conduits, and it turns out these are in the game. I was hoping I was going to be able to get them and play with them and actually test them before making this video, but it seems pretty random where you get them. It seems like specific dungeon bosses drop specific conduits, so there's going to be a lot of like scavenger hunting, trying to figure out where everything comes from. One of them is purchasable. One of them for each spec is purchasable with Conquest, but because the character I made was a template instead of just copying character, I have exactly 0 Conquest, and you need to use a script and have 2 Conquest each to buy them. So 3 of them I'm not going to be able to test on this character. Unless I make another guy and level up, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I just wanted to give you my general thoughts on how powerful I think the stuff is, if the conduits are good, and then we'll follow up again later on if I'm able to obtain everything and properly test. So first of all, assassination. We got their 4 potency conduits. So we start with lethal poisons, which increases the non-periodic damage of your lethal poisons by 30%. So that's the instant application, not the dot portion. This stacks up at max rank, which we don't know how you level them up quite yet. Like that hasn't been solved yet, how you level your conduits. But this ups all the way to 100%, which is doubling your instant poison damage, or the instant hit of deadly poison, rather. This will likely be quite powerful. I see this being useful in Mythic Plus just because it has value on bosses and on trash. It's usually what you're looking for with any sort of like character mod, is good value in both situations, or extreme value in one or the other. But typically good for both is the move. So this seems like it'll be really good. Your poisons are a good amount of your damage as assassination in both AoE and in single target, especially when you're playing Crimson Tempest, because your Crimson Tempest could apply that instant hit. So it's just a finisher that you're slamming out. So I think that this will be quite good, especially combined with the Dashing Scoundrel legendary when we get legendaries. For the increased poison damage or poison crit and on crit with your poisons, you get energy back. So that'll likely be a good combo. Maim, Mangle, Groat increases the damage you mutilate on the target by 20%. This will likely be pretty decent single target. This will come down to numbers, right? There's a world where increasing your instant hit poison by 30%, eventually 100%, is better than increasing mutilate damage by 60%. This should have 100% uptime. You don't let Groats fall. So look out for this to be pretty good in raid. We have Poison Finger Blades. Phantom Knives damage increased by 8% and has an 8% increased poison application chance, which synergizes very well with lethal poison in dungeons. This ends up being a 36% increased damage and poison application chance. I expect these two to be run in tandem in Mythic Plus for pretty much every dungeon if you're playing Assassination. The synergy is too good. Even though this isn't value on single target, I think this amps the value of this too much on on AoE to not play. But we'll see. And then Well-Placed Steel. Shiv's damage is increased by 100 on bleeding targets and extends the duration of your Envenom by 1 second. And what scales up is extending the duration of Envenom by 3 seconds. I don't know how much this is going to matter. This is something we'll have to play with, and probably wait for like Sims to really know the value of this. I don't like it particularly. Seeing these right now in raid, I would expect to play these two, and then your conduit for your covenant, which we talked about in the last video, whatever covenant you have increases the damage of your covenant ability. And then in keys, I would expect to play lethal poison, poison finger blades, and your covenant ability for right now for your 3 potencies, assuming you go 3 potencies. There may be a situation where the soul binds that you want to take are too good and you end up with an extra finesse or endurance, but we'll have to see how that all plays out. Then for outlaw, we have main Gauche. Has an additional 10% chance to strike while Blade Flurry is active. This ends up being a 24% chance. I think this is okay. This is just damage. We'll see what the we'll see what the tuning ends up being like on it. Um, pretty boring. Just an increased chance for your mastery to proc, which is that we don't typically stack. But maybe there's a world where that happens. Oh, no. No, 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 no. I'm dying. No! Alright, don't die. Here we are. We're back. We'll see. This is just numbers. Count the odds is ambush or slaughter if you have chosen to be Venthyr for some reason. And dispatch have a 7% chance to grant you roll the bones combat enhancement buff you do not already have for 5 seconds. The duration and chance is tripled while stealthed, which ends up being 21% at max rank. So from stealth, this is 63% chance on ambush, slaughter, and dispatch to gain a roll the bones buff. This, again, I think this is pretty... I wish the chance was lower and the duration was longer, to be perfectly honest, but maybe this will end up feeling good. I think to me at first look, I think this is whatever. It'll either be good or it won't, depending on, like, you'll just run a sim and it'll tell you, is this good? It doesn't have too much impact on your play other than having to react to a 5-second broadsides potentially. But that's that. I guess it's decent. I'm not really excited for it, but what are you gonna do? Then you have Sleight of Hand, which is roll the bones has a 7% chance of instantly resetting its cooldown. Ends up being a 21% chance. I hate this. I think this is... I don't know. I don't understand the point. Like, as it is, the increased energy cost that they created with roll the bones, it costs 50 energy right now. Even if buffs were... like, there was a buff that was significantly better than the buff you got. It's just like, man, I don't want to spend another 50 energy. I can't imagine that being the play. With the current energy levels and, like, how much we regen and everything. We'll see. Like, this may be... you may end up in a situation where you play this and you intend to reroll off stuff and you hope to get a reset, but I don't know. I hate this conduit. I wish this was literally anything else. And then Sinister Strike, lastly, we have Triple Threat. Sinister Strike has a 20% chance to strike with both weapons after it strikes an additional time. This sounds like it doesn't generate bonus combo points, but maybe it does. Pretty sure this is the one on the Conquest vendor, so I can't test this on my character. We'll have to look to other rogues to test this one out. Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, this is damage as well. It's 20%, it goes up to 35%. Doesn't really impact your play too much, but it'll just do damage. I expect this to be very good. I expect this to be maybe good. I don't like these, but Count the Odds certainly has a chance to be good. I don't think Sleight of Hand ends up being the move. Maybe. We'll see. And then you probably play, if I were to guess right now, I would say you play Triple Threat, Ambi, and then probably your Covenant ability, but maybe Count the Odds. So they're decent. I'm more excited for the assassination ones, even though these are passive as well. They simply because they have synergy with each other, it seems chill. And then we have Subtlety, who gets deeper daggers. This one has actually been found out. Third boss in Halls of Atonement, from what I hear. I don't have it yet, but somebody in the Rogue Discord, Ravenholt, mentioned it, so I'll be farming Halls today to try to get this, to play some sub with it. But yeah, third boss, Halls of Atonement. Have to be Subtlety loot spec for it to drop, so we're going to go farm that out today. Eviscerate and Shadow Vault increase your shadow damage dealt by 30% for 5 seconds, and this scales all the way up to 150%, which is madness. And the big thing about this is that your finishers deal, if exposed weakness is on the target, your finishers deal 50% shadow damage. Well, I guess it's 33%, because they deal their damage, and then 50% of that damage is then dealt as shadow damage additionally. So this will effectively make the shadowed portion more than the original physical damage portion. Right now, this also affects trinkets and other sources of shadow damage, like Lightless Force. I believe is shadow damage. Affects that, which is the new weapon enchants. It's like a little Twilight Dev proc. Will also affect things like, here, let's see, what do we do that deals shadow damage? Rupture is bleed damage. Shadow Strike is physical. I guess we actually don't deal shadow damage other than the boy. The second half of Shadow Vault, the second half of Eviscerate. So it'll increase that there. I guess it's, I don't know why, for some reason I thought Rupture was shadow damage. I guess because Nightblade was. Yeah, okay. So your finishers will just do more damage. It's effectively what this does. Which is chill. Down with this. And it's a little buff to play around. You want to keep the buff up. Sweet. Then we have Perforated Veins. Shadow Strike increases damage to your next backstab, stacking up to 3 times. Eventually up to 100%. It'll be interesting to see at max stacks. That would be a 300% bonus to shadow or to backstab. Maybe we're casting backstab inside Shadow Dance at 3 stacks, which be, I guess, interesting gameplay mechanic. Feels kind of awkward, but maybe it ends up being the move, or maybe you just passively just have this in your backstabs after you come out of dance or are giga buffed, and that's it. So this definitely has potential. Pure single target, obviously, not really any AoE value, but that's fine. Planned execution. Symbols of death increases your crit strike chance by 6%, and it goes up to 34%. So not only do you 15% bonus damage, but you crit 34% more. We'll see if we end up playing Master Assassin. If we play Master Assassin as our legendary, this ends up being a lot less valuable, because the first 5 globals of your symbols are typically going to be Master Assassin amped if you're playing Night Fae. Right? Because if you're playing Night Fae, you'll have Vanish, into Sepsis. Sometimes you'll come from Stealth. Sorry, I don't know why I'm yawning. I'm chugging coffee today, boys. And we're just a sleepy little Andy. So I guess it won't be everyone. I don't know. This will probably be extremely powerful, even with Master Assassin, because the second half of symbols you're probably not covering, right? Like it's pretty difficult to. Just want to make sure I wasn't dying. Pretty difficult to cover every symbols for 10 seconds, especially with the removal of Meld from the Night Fae Soulbind tree. This gains value, obviously, because it's just another. That's one less Vanish we have. So expect to want to get this as soon as possible, because I think it's going to be really strong. And then Stiletto Staccato. Shadow Techniques now reduces the remaining cooldown of Shadow Blades by 1 second. This ends up being, I tested it out and I just auto attacked for 3 minutes, or until like the cooldown would reset, would end up being about 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Just to see how many Shadow Techniques I got, I just auto attacked and refreshed Slice and Dice, and it took me 42 Shadow Technique procs, which took just around 2 minutes and 20 seconds to reset the cooldown on Shadow Blade. So I guess we could do a little bit of math, right? How do we do this? How do we do the math? If we did 42 in 220, which is what, 140 seconds? That means we're getting a proc. We're getting 0.3 procs a second. So how many seconds till we get? All right, 3.33 seconds. Every 3.33 seconds we get a proc. So how many procs do we get in a minute? Let's see. That's not how you do that. I have to do 60 divided by 3.33. All right, we're learning how to do math together today. 60 divided by blah, blah, blah. Yeah, 18 procs in a minute. So when this goes up to 3 seconds, after a minute, we've reduced the cooldown by 54 seconds. There's probably an easier way to do this, but I'm trying to figure out how much the cooldown is going to be after when this goes up to 3, right? So we get 3.33 a second. What about a minute and a half? 90 seconds? 90 seconds divided by 3.33. We would have gotten 27 procs in 90 seconds. Multiply that by 3, which is 81 seconds of CDR. So 90 seconds into the cooldown, there's 90 seconds remaining. So effectively, the cooldown is going to be just over 1.5 minutes at max rank. That seems like it's pretty powerful to me. Shadow Techniques is really strong, especially in AoE now that Shuriken Storm does so much of our damage. And obviously on bosses, that's just an extra use, every use you would have gotten. So every time you would have used Shadow Techniques once, you'll be using it twice. Timings on bosses will affect this pretty significantly, whether or not it's really useful or not. Like there's a chance you just need a 3-minute cooldown. Your damage in between is irrelevant. Who knows? I'll be testing the raid this weekend, so I'll have a better idea for raid stuff for videos following that. But I think all 4 of these seem pretty good. I think it's cool that we might not use our Covenant ability because Stiletto, Staccato, Planned Execution, and Deeper Daggers all seem pretty good for dungeons. And then Perforated Veins has a chance to be pretty good in raid. I don't know which one you pull off for it. This will come down to when Sims start coming out and we have a better idea. But these are all, I think, very cool. All have interesting mechanics to them. Not really super synergy, but they're all interesting to me. And then finally, we got 3 generic ones, sorry. 2 finesse and an endurance. So we got dodging attacks, reduces the remaining cooldown of evasion by 1 second. Successful interrupts with kick, reduce the remaining cooldown of cloak by whatever this is. W1 times 2. No idea what that means. Maybe it's this times, maybe it's double this. So 2 seconds. And then when this goes up to 4, it ends up being 8 seconds. This seems like it could be very good. Every time you kick, you get 8 seconds off cloak. I don't know, man. In dungeons, that seems nuts. This, I don't know how much value this will have. I mean, it'll have pretty good value in like Torghast and world content. That you pop evasion and then you dodge a bunch of attacks and then you have evasion again. That'll be sick. We'll see. We have Recuperator. Slice and Dice heals you for, this says S1 times 18% of your health over 36 seconds. So that's 0.5% a second. This, I'm assuming there's going to be some scaling that's what this number is. And 18% is the base. So it starts at 18% and then it goes up from there. Pretty good. Subtlety has a version of this that is bugged right now on the beta where it's like 8% of your max health every 2 seconds. Maybe it's this. Maybe we accidentally have this active and that's what's doing it. We'll have to see what the numbers are on this. And then finally, rush setup, energy cost of kidney, cheap shot, sap, distract, reduced by 10%. This ends up being 45%. This is obviously pretty good. This will probably be a finesse that you play in PvP, not in keys, even though you are using kidney and, well, you're not using cheap as much, but you are using kidney and distract in keys and sap, but I don't see the use. I think it'll actually be really good in PvP, just the way that, especially the way that subtlety plays in PvP. Not having spent energy on saps and cheaps and kidneys and all that, without talenting into like the free cheap shots when you enter Shadow Dance, this has a lot of potential. Especially as a finesse. Like this is effectively, and as assassination. Assassination, you take internal bleeding. This is effectively a potency conduit in PvP. And maybe kidney shot ends up being a DPS gain for Asa in keys too, with internal bleeding. If you choose to not take Iron Wire, especially without the like if we're not opening with 3 Garrotes anymore, Iron Wire obviously loses a lot of value, so you can move into taking internal bleeding, and then you maybe are with this a half cost kidney shot, doing big bleed damage and doing big energy refund, just hitting that on cooldown. This could be something you play in your finesse slot. This has potential for sure. I think it's much less likely through outlaw. So sub PvP and maybe Asa, probably definitely Asa PvP and maybe Asa PvE. You could see this being played. So overall, I think these are good. The outlaw ones I think are a little underwhelming. Asa are okay, and then sub I think are very good. And then these are nice additions. I still think the endurance conduit we talked about the other day with the reduced cost on feint and vile is going to be sort of a default. Unless this rush setup ends up being very good and we're playing Asa. So those are my thoughts on these. As I get a chance to test them, I'll probably have more things to say. More videos that could be 5 minutes that end up being 20. You know how it's been. So keep an eye out for those. If you like this video, please let me hear your thoughts. I'm curious what you guys think about these conduits, which ones you like, which ones you don't like. And then please subscribe to the channel. That way you get notified for the next videos. I don't know what we're going to be doing next. Maybe it'll be some conduit testing. Maybe I'll get a legendary drop because those are on beta now and I can test some legendaries out again. Otherwise, if I can't get any of that, I'll probably have some videos up this weekend after I get the raid test. So keep an eye out for that. Thanks for watching. Peace.